Greetings, friends. You are on Ruslan Belov's channel, and today we will be reviewing the situation in Ukraine as of January 19th, 2026. Over the past 24 hours, a truly large number of extremely significant events have taken place, so let's get straight to the point. Today, the Rubicon unit released a very important video. In these frames, we can see an entire series of strikes, which are primarily directed at radar assets, radars and radar stations of the armed forces of Ukraine. What's more, all of these targets are located quite far from the line of contact, at a depth of approximately 80 to 120 kilometers. Essentially, the footage shows a large-scale drone operation that likely struck around 10 different stations and elements of the radar network. And we're not talking only about the radars themselves, but also about vehicles, auxiliary equipment, and various devices used by these radars to detect Russian drones and missiles. All of this indicates that the Russian side is conducting extremely dense and deliberate operations along the entire front line, along the very strip itself. And if this conditional line is pushed through, it could give Russian drones and missiles the opportunity to advance more confidently deeper into Ukrainian territory. If we look at the map, we can see that a large number of strikes were recorded in the Mykolaiv area. All of the marked points are locations where strikes were carried out against radars of various types. Numerous hits were also recorded in the Zaporizhzhia area and in the Dnipropetrovsk region. Essentially, this entire strike zone is positioned at a distance of roughly 80–120 kilometers from the line of contact. It is important to emphasize separately, this is far from the only material of this kind. The Russian side began actively publishing footage of such powerful strikes, and generally of strikes involving new types of weapons, starting literally from the second half of January. Let me remind you that on January 16, 2026, footage was shown where, during reconnaissance activity, the Russian side managed to identify a HIMARS position, and almost immediately after it was detected, the launcher was struck by a drone. During the same period, other video materials were also coming in from various parts of Ukraine. Already on January 17th, as a reminder, footage appeared showing Russian drones flying in the area of the town of Bohodukhiv, where a substation was seriously damaged and, in practice, almost completely destroyed. On that day, separate video materials were also published from the Kryvyi Rih area. Then, on January 18th, footage was released of drone strikes, of the same type, against a Patriot air defense system southwest of Kharkiv. In addition, on that same day, videos were shown of substations being hit in the Zaporizhzhia area. And today, the same Rubicon unit once again released strike footage, but this time against radar stations. As a result, we can see that Russian drones are operating very actively and systematically, and the overall picture looks like a preparatory phase. The main emphasis is clearly being placed on radars and air defense elements of the armed forces of Ukraine. Moreover, one can uslovno draw a kind of red line, and everything located north, east, or south of this line falls within the fire engagement zone of the Rubicon unit and its new drone systems. It is also important to pay attention to another point. Judging by the published footage, these drones are flying at a very low altitude above the ground. At the very least, right before striking, they clearly descend quite low. This gives reason to assume that the flight profile is indeed low, which makes the drones far less detectable for Ukrainian detection systems. As for possible large-scale strikes, there are currently many different opinions surrounding this topic. Zelensky has been saying for several days in a row, almost daily, that a strike is supposedly about to happen, that it could take place within the next 24 hours or during the coming night. His statements constantly mention possible strikes on substations, energy infrastructure facilities, and various areas around nuclear power plants. However, in practice, large-scale strikes in the declared form are not taking place. Today, information also surfaced that within the next 48 hours, the Russian Federation may carry out a massive strike. But if we take the international agenda into account, then on January 19th, the World Economic Forum in Davos began. And given this, it is unlikely that the Russian Federation will carry out large-scale strikes during the forum, possibly in order not to escalate the situation and not to worsen potential relations with the President of the United States. Therefore, it cannot be ruled out that the Russian side will wait for the Davos Forum to end, and that strikes may resume only after it concludes. Thus, expectations remain in place both for the next 48 hours and for the period after January 26th, that is, closer to the end of that date and immediately afterward. And such a strike could turn out to be truly very serious. In addition, reports are coming in today that several Iskander strikes once again hit Kharkiv. The city's mayor reports that the strikes were again carried out against industrial facilities as well as energy infrastructure targets. We are waiting for additional information. There is also information today about a series of strikes on Odessa. In the published footage, we can essentially see an aerial battle that took place overnight. The Ukrainian side attempted to shoot down the drones, but judging by the video, the drones reached their targets one after another, and flashes of explosions were regularly seen over Odessa. In the morning, photographs were published, and according to the latest images, several fairly large substations in Odessa region were completely destroyed. Now let's move to the line of contact and begin with the northern sectors. New footage has appeared from the northeastern part of the region. More precisely, from Chernihiv region, not Kharkiv region, as some might have assumed. In this footage, we can see a vehicle which, according to the author of the video, was fully loaded with a large quantity of ammunition. After being struck by a drone, a powerful explosion occurred, confirming both the nature of the cargo and the scale of the detonation. If we speak directly about the front line, then today the Sumy direction looks especially active, perhaps even more active than usual. Constant map adjustments are coming in, and it creates the impression that the Ukrainian side is preparing to repel a possible attack. A large amount of video material is being published from this direction today, related to the Khotin-Nova Sech line, which represents the next defensive line of the armed forces of Ukraine. In almost all of these clips, the same pattern can be observed. Ukrainian vehicles arrive at this defensive line, along with personnel, weapons, and equipment. After that, Russian drones begin systematically destroying this equipment, one episode after another. Such a concentration of similar videos suggests that the Ukrainian side is urgently redeploying fresh forces to the Sumy direction, units that are supposed to take up defensive positions and prepare for possible strikes. In the near future, offensive activity by the armed forces of the Russian Federation may begin here. The presumed objective of this advance is to enter the area of the settlements of Khotin and Pisarevka in order to Zakropitsa and to form a foothold that could later be used for further movement towards Stetskivka and directly toward the city of Sumy. It is also being reported today that Russian units are actively advancing from the state border, from the area of the settlement of Guyevo toward the large Sumy forest. This information is being disseminated by various neutral mapping services that publish updates based on the past 24 hours. The Russian army is also acting quite actively east of the settlement of Miropolye. This is how the situation looked on the map as of January 18th. However, today, January 19th, new adjustments are being made, and based on these changes, it can be concluded that the Russian side has set itself the goal of fully cutting off the so-called pocket, that is, the salient located east of Miropolye. At the same time, a foothold is being prepared ahead of a possible assault on Miropolye itself, as well as on the settlements of Zaporizhzhia and Velika Rybitsa. In addition, fresh video materials are appearing today from the area of the settlement of Vysok. Let me remind you that Nesklika weeks ago, the Ministry of Defense of the Russian Federation officially confirmed the advance of Russian units in this sector. And today, footage of objective control is being published, showing how the Ukrainian side is using drones to strike units of the Russian army in the settlements of Vysok and Hrabovske. At the same time, more and more videos, as well as various publications and articles, confirm that Russian forces have managed to accumulate fairly large forces in this direction. There is a possibility that in the near future, further movement to the west will begin towards such settlements as Taratutino, Novodmitrivka, and Ryasne. Next, we move to the Kharkiv sector of the front. Here, the Russian army continues active actions along the Grafskoye-Semyonovka perimeter. Various pro-Russian sources and experts are making adjustments to their maps, based on which it can be concluded that Russian units have significantly improved their positions in the Grafskoye area. Essentially, the settlement has already been fully passed through. In addition, it is reported that Russian units have managed to gain a foothold on the northern outskirts of the settlement of Semyonovka. Thus, the Russian army continues advancing along the T-2104 highway and along the course of the Siversky Donetsk River, shifting in the southern direction. We have already discussed the Kupiansk direction earlier. For now, the situation there still remains within what is known as the fog of war, and this direction may well become one of the sectors where Sirsky will attempt to organize a new offensive. Now we move to the Lyman sector of the front, from which a large number of significant adjustments are coming in today. Ukrainian sources have published several video materials posvyshony combat operations in this area. These recordings capture the advance of Russian units as well as the fact that they have Zakropilis. Based on these videos, new changes were made to the map. According to the published footage, Russian units managed to gain a foothold in a number of strongpoints located east of Lyman. In addition, it is noted that they managed to improve their positions northwest of the settlement of Zaporizhzhia. Based on the overall set of these materials, it can be concluded that at the moment the Russian army is focused on the task of cutting off the salient located northeast of Lyman. We are talking about the area within the triangle of the settlements of Stavki, Zaporizhzhia, and Lyman. This is exactly the sector we are discussing. There is a clear attempt to straighten the front line, merge footholds, and then advance on a broader front, both toward Lyman itself and toward its central part. From the Sloviansk direction, only minor adjustments are being reported. If on January 18th the map looked a certain way, then today, January 19th, a small redrawing is being recorded. We can see that the Russian army continues offensive operations in the fields toward Ry-Oleksandrivka, as well as in the direction of Kaleniki and Kriva Luka. From the Kostiantinivka sector, almost no new information has been received today. Only a few videos were published from the area of the M32-N20 highway. In these clips, we can see FPV drones being used against Russian assault troops who are moving toward Kostiantinivka in small groups, along forest belts and roads. Despite the lack of specific map adjustments, these videos are important because they confirm the current front line on this sector. Next, we move to the Dobropilya direction, from which a large amount of truly significant news is coming in today. Let me remind you that a few days ago, Valery Gerasimov visited the area of responsibility of the center grouping of forces. This event dates back to January 15, 2026. More precisely, that is when a report dedicated to his inspection was published. Apparently, at that time, the final details and the final touches of a possible offensive could have been discussed. And judging by the adjustments coming in today from this sector of the front, it can be concluded that after a fairly prolonged regrouping, the center grouping of forces is once again beginning offensive operations in this direction towards such settlements as Dobropilya and Druzhkivka. This is how the map has changed over the past 24 hours. Certain pro-Russian neutral mapping sources today indicate an advance of the Russian army toward the settlement of Novodonbass. In addition, some pro-Russian experts report that Russian troops have managed to significantly improve their positions in the Novodonbass area. These are the adjustments we are currently seeing in this sector. So far, there has been no official confirmation from the Ministry of Defense and no published geolocation that would Okhanchatlna confirm this. However, if this information is confirmed, then at the moment the distance between the forward Russian positions and the settlement of Dobropilya is already less than 4 kilometers. That means the offensive may Preparatory in the near future. At the very least, one can expect that reconnaissance and sabotage groups will begin moving toward Dobropilya in the very near term. In fact, this is almost inevitable. The Russian army also continues an active advance along the bed of the Kryvyi Torets River and further along the Kazhenyi Torets in the direction of Druzhkivka. It appears that it is imminent today that the Druzhkivka offensive operation is beginning. The Ministry of Defense of the Russian Federation also reports that as a result of combat operations, Russian forces managed to significantly improve their position in the area of the settlement of Novopavlivka. Based on this statement, we accordingly make the necessary adjustments on the map. This advance is truly extremely important, because take note, there is a fairly large distance between the settlements of Sofiivka and Novopavlivka, and it is across open terrain. Precisely for this reason, the advance here took a very long time. Russian units were gradually filtering through forest belts, trying to Zakropitsa. Apparently, that consolidation happened relatively recently. and now they have already been able to confidently move through the entire settlement. Next, the Russian army enters, so to speak, a small cluster of villages. First comes Novopavlivka, and literally just a few hundred meters later, Pavlivka begins. After Pavlivka, at roughly the same short distance, the settlement of Patriot begins. And then after Patriot, the villages essentially stretch without breaks all the way to Novopavlivka. After Novopavlivka, Raiska begins, and then comes Druzhkivka itself. In other words, the most difficult and complicated part of the advance was the space between Sofiivka and Novopavlivka, and it seems that this segment was passed with significant strain and naprogenium seal. Now, the advance will already proceed through an area with denser development, wooden buildings, concrete basements, and various shelters. Here, Russian units may have more opportunities to take cover, find protection, and at least somewhat conceal themselves from the hundreds of Ukrainian drones that are constantly present in the air over this area. Apparently, the Russian side will only increase the pace of the offensive in this sector. But at the same time, it is important to remember the parallel Udar in the direction of Dobropilya. These two directions of pressure also create an opportunity for the Russian army to develop movement further to the north, toward Kucherev Yar and Zoloty Kolodets. Therefore, it is precisely in this area that we can expect extremely high activity from the center grouping of forces in the near future. Next, we move to the Zaporizhzhia direction. If we speak about the foothold along the Haichur River, small changes are being recorded here. Information is coming from neutral mapping services. The Russian army is essentially finishing the fighting for a network of strongpoints located on the Ukrainian side of the Haichur River, and step by step is advancing toward the Zalizhnye-Pokrovsky railway line, approaching it from the eastern direction. That is, the formation of not only a foothold along the river itself is now being completed, but it is also practically reaching its final stage, the creation of a foothold already along the railway line. However, if we examine the sector along the Zalizhnye-Starokranka-Verkhnya Tersa line, extremely intense fighting continues there. In this segment, the Russian army is not yet showing further advancement, apparently due to the fact that the Ukrainian side has managed to significantly reinforce its battle formations with a large number of units, and therefore further movement westward remains difficult at this stage. If we speak about the western Zaporizhzhia direction, another important and truly significant piece of news is coming from there. Today, the Ministry of Defense of the Russian Federation also confirmed the advance of Russian units in the area of the settlement of Pavlivka. Based on this report, we accordingly make an adjustment to the map. This is how the map looked as recently as January 18th. But today, January 19th, it already reflects the situation differently, and the changes are quite visible. At the moment, the distance from the settlement of Pavlivka toward the direction of the settlement of Buryakivka is approximately 11 kilometers. At the same time, Buryakivka itself is essentially the beginning of the Orikhiv agglomeration, and it is precisely as forces approach Buryakivka that logically fighting should begin directly for the city of Orikhiv. It is also reported that Russian units have managed to significantly improve their positions within the settlement of Primorska. The Ukrainian side published the corresponding video material, but we will not examine it in detail. Overall, Russian units are gradually moving through the territory of this village, consolidating on the captured areas and reaching its northern outskirts. And that's all, dear friends. Thank you to everyone who watches. Be sure to subscribe to the channel and support the episode with likes. Wishing you all the best and take care.